So we begin today, or we move further into this time together. And so the theme for September has really been around our homecoming theme, which is about rediscovering and reconnecting and renewing. So rediscover, reconnect, renew. And we've been talking all month about this idea of coming home, but it really is about coming home to ourselves, remembering who we are as Christed beings, remembering who we are as divine inheritors of the truth, remembering who we are and inhabiting more of our own God space, more of our own goodness, more of our own greatness. You know, last week we talked about surrendering, in a sense. It was about opening up your heart to healing. And all of these talks, all of our talks are on YouTube. All of our services are on Facebook. So you've missed it, you can catch up with that. But ultimately, what we were talking about was understanding that God loves us. And where that might seem like a very simple concept, for most of us to really download that in or upload that or feel that fully, deeply, profoundly is earth-shattering. Because where we think we know that, we kind of don't. When we really push ourselves and we're in this prayerful, meditative state, last week we said it out loud together, and there were people in here tearing up, people in here who were feeling the Spirit moving. Why? Because somewhere in our mind, maybe some of us don't fully believe it. Or maybe somewhere in our mind, we just haven't fully allowed for that mysticism to take us over and just feel. That creates within us this sense of joy and zeal and excitement and wonder. And that's really why we gather here. That is really the point of spiritual community. You know, when I was at the Parliament of World Religions in Chicago last month, I mentioned to y'all that I went to a panel with Reverend Richard Rohr, or Father Richard Rohr, and Professor Elaine Pagels, and it was a whole panel on mushrooms. Go figure, right? But part of what they were saying is profound, in that they were saying people are searching these psychedelics as a way to feel the divine, because we have forgotten how to do that. And so we need something from the outside to help us get into that state. Now, I'm not challenging that. I'm not saying it's a wrong thing. All I'm saying is that this is what we as human beings are needing, are longing for. Our heart is desiring to feel that allness, to feel that oneness, to feel the Spirit just wash over us and bless us and remind us who we are. And so that's what we're doing. Today, we move on in our journey to talk about building the beloved community, or beloved for some of you who prefer that. You know, we are celebrating homecoming. We are celebrating 107 years as a community to be in existence. That is no small potatoes, y'all. 107 years. It began as the dream of one woman, Elizabeth Pierce Sand, who started in 1916 with Unity as a study group. And it grew, and it grew, and it grew. Some years later, in the 30s, her daughter took over Unity, and that is Elizabeth Sand Turner, who ends up being one of the very important historical figures in the Unity movement. She brought Charles Fillmore here to speak in the 30s. Later, she left after many years of being a minister here to go work at Unity Village. She was a lecturer all over the country, all over the world, promoting truth, teaching truth, and uplifting the Unity movement. She was, in essence, building the beloved community with the Fillmores, sharing in that vision, in that dream that became a global movement. Asking the question, what does it mean to come home? And what does it mean, good people, to be free? To be free in the spirit, to be free of lack and limitation, to be free of the terrible twos, as our congregant Miriam, I don't know if she's here, she's in Atlanta, would say, too young, too old, too big, too small, all the twos that keep us locked in chains. They called the question on those. And how do we build communities to be able to support that liberation? Sometimes it's challenging. I want y'all to take just a kind of a mental pause right now to think about this. What do you think it was like for a woman in 1960s to go against the current of traditional Christianity in Tennessee? That was easy, right, y'all? No, we forget that all of these things that we come from were not easy. They were not handed to anyone. These came after trials and tribulations and people calling you a Satan worshiper and people calling you all kinds of things, right? But they came and they built because they had that vision and that dream and they had that knowing deep in their gut about why they were called to this iteration of life. They were going against the grain, but they were brave. They were courageous. Oh, and they were bold, right? Like Miss Fillmore says, approaching the throne boldly. They approached the throne boldly, but they were steeped in faith. Recently, my wife and I, Veronica, we were watching a Netflix documentary series called, I think, like Living to 100, the Blue Zones. Anybody seen that? If you haven't seen it, it's really quite amazing. And they were talking about what is it like. This gentleman has been doing research around the globe for decades about what does it take to be a centenarian. So what does it take to live to be 100? And he has gone for decades all over the world trying to figure out what are some of the secrets. And so this documentary is kind of going over and going through some of these communities where this has happened. And so he finds kind of like a secret sauce, and he's talking about the various elements that go into this and how people can live to 100 and be joyous and be without pain and be without disease and be without taking pills. There's this one man who lives in Costa Rica, and he was 100, and he's like jumping on the horse like he's Clint Eastwood or like, John Wayne, and riding around chopping wood. Can y'all imagine being 100 and doing these spectacular things? I never wanted to live 100, but after that, I was like, okay, I could do this. Like that, I could do this. But here's what he found, that it was, among other things, two big things that created this ability in these human beings to not just live life, but live life joyously and prosperously. And it was faith. One of those things. Believing in something, whether it was something greater than themselves or something that was themselves or in themselves as part of something greater, however you want to think about faith. But it was about having faith and having a vision of life within that faith for oneself. And the other thing, good people, was community. All of these people had community. Unfortunately, there is an epidemic in our country where people are alone. Did y'all know that? People are increasingly living alone. And this is counter to what feeds us as human beings. And so he's saying in this, our lives are not created to be alone. We are created in community. And this is what allows for us to be in this healing energy, in this loving energy, in this building of the beloved community. In 1913, there was a philosopher, an American philosopher named Josiah Royce. And he wrote this: "My life means nothing, either theoretically or practically, unless I am a member of a community." Now, Royce observed that besides the actual communities we experience on a daily basis, there was actually something called the beloved community, the beloved community. And it was made up of all those dedicated fully to the cause of loyalty and truth and reality itself. Now, he made a really interesting proposition. Most of us think that it is ourselves, we as individuals, because we come from a very Western, very American individualist culture and way of thinking. But he turned it on his head and he said, it's really community that creates us. Whatever we are really ultimately is a product of our community. Now, he was a metaphysician as well. He was a Harvard professor, and he was one of these early folks that introduced into this country and into circles about communicating about this idea of how maybe community and building community was so much more than just an individual ethic or an individual way of being. Charles Fillmore, our co-founder, talked a lot in his writings about race consciousness, and I've talked about that here. I think most people have not done a deep dive in the work that he's done around that, because this is exactly what he's saying. You can be whoever you think you want to be, but the collective consciousness will always either pull you back or propel you forward or move you in or displace you. And so this is why he also was very attuned to how do we build this collective consciousness. Now, the beloved community was coined by Professor Royce, but the person in our American history, really in global history, that's most known for this, who knows who that is? Who would talk about the beloved community? Come on, y'all. Y'all know this. I heard somebody say it. Did somebody say King? Yes, thank you. All right, y'all will get paid after service. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King became famous, really, for a term and an idea that he learned while he was studying theology and studying philosophy that was from Royce. And that became, in his vision, the ultimate goal. As an early example, after the Montgomery bus boycotts, when he was speaking about the larger movement toward which they were building, this is what he said: "But the end is reconciliation. The end is redemption. The end is the creation of a beloved community. It is this type of spirit and this type of love that can transform opposers into friends. It is a kind of understanding and goodwill that will transform the deep gloom of the old age into the exuberant gladness of the new age. It is this love. It is this love. It is this love which will bring about miracles." You know, Dr. King's friend, the Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh, continued the legacy of the beloved community, but he pushed it out a little bit more to really be mindful of all sentient beings. And sentient beings meaning just feeling, whoever or whatever was of a feeling nature. So animals, for example. Some people even believe that plants and things around us, rocks, have a feeling nature. He called that Sangha. And he continued the work of Dr. King, who was both a friend and an inspiration. And he was quoted as saying this, which is very interesting. I want y'all to really take this in. The next Buddha may take the form of a community practicing understanding and loving kindness, a community practicing loving kindness. What is he saying there? We're used to the Buddha, right? The Christ, the Savior being a person, someone we can say that person was the one that did it. He did it. Usually it's a he, right? Okay, let's be truthful. But what he's saying here is that a community, a beloved community, can be the next way that shows the light. Not one person, but a conscious, committed, integrous group can be the next Buddha. See, Jesus is our master teacher and way shower in unity. And if we think about really, truly what was his ministry, it was all about building the beloved community. This idea of inclusion and redemption and forgiveness and healing and justice and freedom. Freedom. And so through his ministry, through the healings that we see, through all the stories and however you want to think about the Bible, we all have different ways we come to it. But if we think about it, all of this really is being flagged. This ministry in the New Testament, these stories, it's historical if you want to believe that way, however you think about it, is really about having people have hope, having people live in compassion, having people engage in empathy, and more than anything, really being the hand and the feet and the voice of love. Yes, woohoo. Y'all can say woohoo for that. Yeah. Paul, the Apostle Paul, is known really in history as being kind of the one that propelled Christianity or developed kind of Christianity and helped kind of take it globally, right? He was kind of like the social influencer, right, of that time, without a Insta. And so he pushed it out into the world. And oftentimes the writings of Paul, now those of you may remember, Paul was Saul. He was somebody that actually was a condemner of Christians. He was actually a persecutor of Christians. And at some point in his life, he had a deep calling. He saw the light. He had the conversion of what it meant to be love and compassion and empathy. And so he became a proponent of these teachings. But one of the things that he says, I love in Colossians, he's writing letters to communities who, guess what, had dissension. Can you imagine that? Dissension in a church? Nah, not here. But he's talking about it's part of the human experience that we get a bunch of people together in a room and stuff happens sometimes. And so he's writing to these communities and saying to them, giving them hope and giving them inspiration and giving them ideas. And so he's talking to them about this. But one of the interesting things, I'm not going to read Colossians 3:12, but go home. That's your homework. Colossians 3:12. He's talking about what it means to be the beloved community, what it means to embody this, to be compassionate and kind and humble and meek and patient and all of this. But one of the things he says in Colossians 1:12 is share in the inheritance of the saints in the light. So he's telling them, you all are inheritors of this legacy. You are saints in the light. Interesting. He's giving them the vision. He's helping them with the dream. He's creating through these letters the idea of, hold on, let's stay firm. Remember who you are. Remember what we're doing. And so they can dream into what it means to be the beloved community. as the beloved community is built and repaired and manifested, not out there, it's manifested right here in our hearts. It's manifested right here in our consciousness. It's manifested right here in our second brain, in our core, where there is courage and where there is creativity. That's where it begins. I want to share a quote with you from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. about the beloved community. At the heart of all that civilization has meant and developed is community. The mutually cooperative and voluntary venture of man to assume a semblance of responsibility for his brother, his human brother, sister, other, friend. Join with the earth and each other to bring new life to the land, to restore the waters, to refresh the air, to renew the forests, to care for the plants, to protect the creatures, to celebrate the seas, to rejoice in the sunlight, to sing the song of the stars, to recall our destiny, to renew our spirits, to reinvigorate our bodies, to recreate the human community, to promote justice and peace, to love our children and love one another, to join together as many and diverse expressions of one loving mystery for the healing of the earth and the renewal of all life. Woo, that's a whole lot, right? Man, yeah, y'all can clap. Y'all can clap. That wasn't me. I offer you this today so that you, Unity of Nashville, you online, you all in your lives can dream into your vision of Unity of Nashville. Dream into your vision of Tennessee. Dream into your vision of the United States. Dream into the vision of the global world. We are dreamers. We are visioners, and that has power. Take a minute just for a second. Take a deep breath, and if you're brave enough, close your eyes and just, what do you see? What do you feel? What do you know? Is this vision based on this love and this grace? Is this vision based on this hope and compassion and empathy? Is this vision vibrating with the divine? Take a deep breath. Hold that dream for yourself, and if you feel called, I would love to hear what came to you all. I'm moving to conclude right now, but I want to share with y'all quickly a story about visioning, about dreaming that sometimes calls us to places that we could never have imagined, to do things that was never on our sphere of doing. But that's what it is when we dream into the beloved community, when we receive the call and we listen and we move. I had the distinct honor and surprise of being asked to be backstage at the Grand Ole Opry on Friday. I had the privilege to pray. It's still like it didn't happen. Pray the musicians and the vocalists and the publicists and the Sony record execs and folks that were there. I had that honor to pray them in. And I tell you that because sometimes we never know what we're doing until we're there. Sometimes we never know why we go through what we go through until we're there. And I took that as a sign. You know, many of you may or may not ascribe to the idea, but, you know, the Grand Ole Opry for many, many years has a legacy that certain people were not necessarily to be put on stage, or there were people that purposely wanted to use the Opry as a way to uphold a very particular vision of either Christianity or the South or what have you. But that is changing. And I was there that is changing. I was there and I got to meet Ricky Skaggs. Some bluegrass that blew my mind. But I was also there with Rufus Wainwright. Anybody know who Rufus Wainwright is? He was making his Grand Ole Opry debut the same day I was, I guess, in a different way. He came to the stage in a jean skirt, cowboy boots, a plaid jacket, no shirt, chest hair all talking, big floral arrangement, all kinds of adornment on his jacket. And he sang. And I have to tell you, if you get a chance to see it, I don't know if they do the replays, but it was the most transcendent music. I literally cried. He was there as well with Chapel Hart, who are 3 African-American sisters. If you haven't listened to them, please do. They're 2 sisters and a cousin, African-American women from Missouri. Wendy Moten was there, who is African-American traditional country singer and has done all sorts of things in the music business. She was singing with Stephanie Urbina Jones. Many of you have seen her here. Yeah. Stephanie Urbina Jones brought mariachi for the first time to the Grand Ole Opry. History was made. Coretta Scott King, in keeping with Martin Luther King's legacy, and I don't have time to go into the quote, but it's beautiful. Maybe I'll put it in social media. But she says, we have to believe that we can accomplish this. For all the naysayers that say, oh, that's just cute. It's like bubble gum and rainbows and sunshine. It sounds good, but it'll never happen. And she says, we have to believe that we can accomplish this goal of the beloved community through courage and determination and education and training, because if enough willing people are willing to make the commitment, the beloved community will be a reality. So I leave you with here today, good people. Are you willing to make the necessary commitments to build this beloved community? John Lewis said, it's our struggle of a lifetime, this, and maybe even many lifetimes. And each one of us in every generation must do our part. And so as we move to celebrate and eat and be joyous about our 107th anniversary, what are we dreaming into? What are we visioning? What are we taking as our mark into the world as the next 107 years? How will we be those saints of the light? And how will we be the true prophecy walkers? Building not just a unity of Nashville, building not just a new Nashville, building not just a new Tennessee, building not just a new United States of America, but being the love and the light that is building a new world. This, beautiful people, is a beloved community, and so it is, and so we let it be. Amen.